I just had a great session of D&D. Now our sessions are typically good, and good is, well, good, but sometimes you have a session that is not just good, it's great. You know, one of those sessions where the players are already chatting excitedly as they're packing up their dice and the miniatures, and that got me thinking, what makes a great session? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. First off, let's take a page out of the screenwriter's book and split our session into 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. I have advice for how you can make each of these individual parts great, and how that in combination is going to make the sum of the whole, the entire session, a great session. But before we can begin with that, we need to actually start before the session even starts. Yes, you know it's coming. It's the dreaded P word: preparation. There's no way around it. Preparation is an important factor in whether or not a session is going to be successful. Now, I'm not talking about doing hours of prep here. I'm talking about just prepping the highlights, thinking about how you envision the beginning, the middle, and the end of the session would go, thinking about what sort of scenes you want to have in there, how you describe them, thinking about encounters and what sort of stuff you need to prepare for that, monsters, maps, and all that, thinking about the NPCs you might need to have a name and a description for. So the point isn't to be prepared for everything, it's just to be prepared enough that you feel confident, you feel comfortable, and you can adapt to the situation as is required of you. All right, and then we're ready to begin the session. And here I'll draw upon something Mike, the awesome author of the Lazy DM's Guide, also really emphasizes, and that is the strong start. For me, the strong start should do a few things. First off, it should have some action, and that doesn't have to be combat. It can just be a vividly explained scene or something memorable that happens, even just a fun role-playing moment with an NPC. As long as there's some action, it's not just boring. The second thing is that I also want the start to usually set the tone for the whole session. So if the session is going to be a horror dungeon crawly thing, I want a start that is more horror and dungeon crawly. Of course, the tone can change midway through, and you can subvert expectations, starting lightheartedly, and suddenly something catastrophic happens, and that can work out really well. But for the most part, you want the beginning to be in line with what you want the tone and theme of the session to be. Finally, the beginning should hook the players into the session. If they already know what they're doing, it can just reaffirm that. It can also just be a reminder. It's been a few weeks since the last session, it happens to all of us, so they're going, oh yeah, the guards are trying to arrest us because someone stole the king's crown and they think we did it, so we need to find the real thief before we're thrown into prison. So I'll give you an example from our last session, and don't worry, I'll try to spare you the boring details. I'll just quickly go over how our last session started. So the characters are in this crypt. They're trying to find the phylactery of Sastam, the red wizard and ruler of Thay, and also a lich, because they want to destroy him and save Thay. But after braving all the traps and challenges in the tomb, they found only old bones in a sarcophagus, and they are kind of disappointed, and they ended the last session just about to get a vision of what had happened here. And they had the Saints of Reminiscence, which is one of my favorite items from the Wanderer's Guide to Merchant Magic, because it gives the characters a tool to sort of perform these investigations, look at CCTV, look back into the past to see what happened at a certain location, and they are about to use this item. By the way, if you like items like these and you also want item cards, we are making item cards exactly like the one that's showing up on screen right now, and we're making those over on Kickstarter. The campaign is almost running out, but you can still get in on it, or if you're watching this from future, you can pick that up on our web shop. There will be links to all of that in the description down below. That's where the last session ended. The characters were about to get this vision of what had happened here in the crypt, and the beginning of the session was that they got that vision. They got to see how Sastam broke in during the burial ceremony using a sphere of annihilation to annihilate the priest that were interring this priestess, this elven priestess, and was just about to completely annihilate the corpse of the priestess, but then hesitated, perhaps seeming a bit emotional, if a lich can show emotion in that way, before abandoning the project and allowing the priestess to be buried, allowing her corpse to still exist. And that, of course, gives them a lot of questions. Why did Sastam want to annihilate this corpse, and why didn't he do it? And it was, of course, also action, even though it was just me describing what happened to the players. Vivid descriptions of past events, combat, stuff going down, that really caught their attention and got them hooked into the session. And that brings us to the middle of the session, the meat and potatoes of it all, what's going to be most of the time you spend at the table. And that's usually filled with stuff you can't really plan that well for, but what you can plan for is the pacing. We want to have a good mix of the different pillars of Dungeons & Dragons. That's your social pillar, your exploration pillar, and of course your combat pillar. You also want to make sure there's a good balance of excitement and non-excitement, so the players don't become overwhelmed or bored. And you also want to have some momentum where the characters are learning new stuff. They're going to be pushed in directions, maybe several directions at once, but you want the session to keep moving forward. In my specific example, the characters exited the tomb with the priestess's bones and a sort of loose goal of getting somewhere so they could use Speak with Dead or Resurrection to talk with the priestess, figure out what she knew and how her relationship with Sastam was, and all that stuff. They were in the middle of a marsh, so quite a bit away from civilization, and decided to head northward toward the nearest city that they knew about. Now, this was some sort of exploration thing where you had some survival checks to see if they could find their way, some constitution checks to see if they could manage without exhaustion, stuff like that. Not too much, because then I threw in a combat encounter. I knew it was probably going to be the session's own encounter, so I dialed the difficulty up a good notch. After defeating this swarm creature, nearly costing the wizard their life, the characters continued on. They had some more survival checks, some more exploration to do. Eventually, they happened upon a hurt griffin lying in the swamp. They knew the griffin's rider, actually. They had dealings with him previously, and the griffin, who was magically enhanced to be able to speak, could tell them about how it and its rider were ambushed, and how asking them to basically help find the rider, help secure them, stuff like that. That gave them sort of an alternate plot point to follow, and it also maybe intertwined with the plot point they were following, because the trek could take them to some witches that might be able to cast Speak with Dead or Resurrection and all that. The point I'm trying to make here is that we had a mix of some exploration, some combat, and some social encounter. We also had some momentum, pushing things forward, giving the players and the characters some clues about what they should do, what they could do at least, so they had some choices. And of course, we also had that balance between there's some exciting stuff, there's a combat, there's some stuff happening, and there's also some less exciting stuff, some survival checks, just some walking around. And that is how, for me at least, we keep good pacing in the middle of the session. And that brings us to the session's ending, which is of course also where we lay the groundwork for our next great session. Simply put, we want an ending that pays off the characters' actions throughout the session or the past few sessions, or that presents a new twist or some new information that sort of subverts their expectations or creates some new difficult choices for them. If possible, we also want an ending that works as a cliffhanger of some sorts. The characters find a new mysterious magic item, or they're just about to be ambushed by some assassins, or they're just delving into the dragon's den and hear it roaring. Stuff like that where they can be excited about, oh shit, what's going to happen in the next session, and also allows us to start the next session with some sort of action or some sort of revelation. Finally, we also, mostly for our own preparation, want to have an ending that's also gives the player something to work with in terms of deciding what they're going to do in the next session, if possible, because that just makes our preparation easier. In our example, the characters rejuvenated the wounded griffin, they took it along, and were still heading towards their city, thinking that at the very least they'd bring the griffin to safety and see about the sort of skeletal remains they were trying to speak to, and maybe pursuing saving the griffin rider. They weren't really sure. So they walk a bit more, there's some more exploration checks and stuff like that, but very soon they come to a hill, they crest the hill, and they can look out over the city that they're going towards, and they see that it is in flames. There's smoke roaring up. It's been probably, it looks like, completely destroyed. Now, they knew that the city was going to be besieged by a barbarian horde, which is something that is intertwined with the rest of the plot. Again, details don't matter too much, and they had the opportunity to go there and try and do something about it, but decided that they would take a detour towards this tomb instead of heading directly towards the city. That was fine. That was a choice I wanted them to make, and they made a choice, but now there are consequences to that choice. Beyond providing consequences for the characters' actions in this session and the previous sessions, it also sort of presents a twist, because they were going there to get some help, and now they probably won't be able to do so. At least it doesn't seem like it. That means, of course, that they have some choices to make. Are they still going to go into the city? Are they trying to go around the city instead? What are they going to do? Now, I didn't ask them to come up with answers to all of that immediately. Instead, I asked them to think about it, speak about it amongst themselves, and just let me know before I start preparing for the next session. I don't need to know immediately, but I would like to know before I have to prep, of course, because that just makes my preparation that much easier, and it makes it easy for me to create the correct framework for a great session in the next session. As you can maybe tell from me rambling about this session and rambling about how I try to build a great session, there's nothing really particularly amazing about this session. Nothing really grand happened. There was a vision, there was some exploration, there was some combat, there was a little social encounter, and then there was a sort of twist ending with some vividly explained burning city stuff. Nothing really major here, but the sum of the parts made it for a very great session. The characters and the players had been hooked along all the way. They felt excited, they felt like they were part of something momentous, and they felt like stuff happened, and that their actions also affected what happened. And that, in the end, is the most important thing, that the players had fun, I had fun, and we had a great session. Now, you can't have great sessions every time, I don't either. There's a lot of things that are out of your control, a lot of little things. How well did you sleep? Are your players in a good mood? Did you bring the correct snacks to the table? All that stuff that's going to affect whether or not the session is going to be great. But if you think about these things and put a little thought into these things, I guarantee you that you will more often have a good session, and you will probably sometimes even have a great session. And that's really all the advice that I have to give you in this video. If you like what we do here, please subscribe to the channel down below. I would also want to ask you what you think makes a session great, and let me know about that in the comments down below. We also have the 5e Magic Item Cards Kickstarter running right now, or if you're watching this from the future, you can probably pick them up, maybe pre-order them, even buy them if you're very much from the future, and there'll be links to all of that stuff in the description down below. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.